Thank you so much for today. God, thank you for who you are. God, whatever is happening in our lives, whatever it is that has our attention, God, I just pray that you would help us today. God, we need you. We need you, and God, we're choosing to be in this place, not just physically, but God, mentally, spiritually. God, we want to be available for what it is that you're speaking to us, what it is that you're showing us today. So God, we pray that the truth of your word would come alive in us. God, that it would be real to us. God, thank you that you're for us and not against us. God, thank you that your love meets us where we are. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. There's this passage of Scripture as we're singing today, and this isn't anywhere back there, so don't be looking for it. But Acts chapter 16, there's this, and I bring this up because we've been talking in Romans, all 15 weeks we've been in Romans. And I hope that you've been, just diving in and hearing what it is. But Paul is, written 3/4 of the New Testament. And a lot of times Paul's writing from prison. I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. That Paul is writing his letters from the comfort of prison. Not from the comfort of his living room. Not from the comfort of life going good. But from prison. And Acts chapter 16 is this moment where Paul and Silas are praying. They're going about their business. They're going about their day. And they meet this woman who is filled of demons. She's a fortune teller, the Bible tells us. And Paul is if you look at the word, it uses Paul is so exhausted by this woman that keeps following them around. Anybody in your life exhaust you? Come on, somebody. Come on. So much that Paul looks at her and like, all right, enough is enough. Demon, come out. I mean, sometimes you just got to look at a friend and be like, okay, enough's enough. Devil, come out of her. Come on. You've been calling her a devil behind her back for years. Right? Too soon on whatever? And Paul says, come out. And it says that her owner is mad because now she's free. And now the owner knows she's no longer going to make him the money. I'm going to just throw this out there. There are things that happen in our culture that if people get set free, financially will bankrupt this country. The abortion industry, the sex trafficking industry brings in more money than all major sports combined. What happens when people start getting set free from that? This is what's happening right here. And it says that a mob quickly formed against Paul and Silas, and the city officials ordered them stripped and beaten with wooden rods. For what? For setting a woman free. They were severely beaten, and then they were thrown into prison, and the jailer ordered them to make sure they didn't escape. So the jailer put them in the inner dungeon. Okay? Solitary confinement. The inner dungeon. No windows. And said, whoa, hello. New glasses, folks. New glasses. I do that in the new building. We might have problems. Wow. I'm going back to America's tomorrow. Good night. I was close to... Tom, where were you at on that one, man? I need you... Woo! Wow. Huh. Man, that won't happen in second service, I promise that. Some of you watching online just said, well, he got shorter. I didn't think that could happen. So the jailer put them in the inner dungeon, clamped their feet in the stocks, and around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the other prisoners were listening. Suddenly there was a massive earthquake in the prison, and there was a massive earthquake, and the prison was shaken to its foundation, and all the doors immediately flew open, and the chains of every prisoner fell off. The jailer woke up to see the prison doors wide open, and he assumed the prisoners had escaped, so he drew his sword to kill himself. But Paul shouted to him, "Stop, don't kill yourself. We're still here." There's so many things. This isn't even in my notes. This is just from singing I Raise a Hallelujah. See, you're in the middle of something right now, and your problem is you're trying to complain your way out of prison. You're trying to surround yourself with people who will agree with you on whatever it is that you're facing, because there's an injustice that has happened to you. And everyone knows it's an injustice. God knows it's an injustice. If you're looking for people to tell you that you're right and they're wrong, you're going to have those people line up all day long. He's looking for someone who's willing to be in the inner prison chained up, who's willing to sing their way out of whatever it is that you're facing. That's who he's looking for. See, there's one way out, but it's not natural, it's very difficult, and we get hung up on the things that are happening to us, and this is where we find ourselves in Romans 14. We're getting so caught up on what it's not about that we're missing what it is about. Right? This is Romans 13. We get so caught up in I gotta submit to the governing authorities, and if I don't, and so we debate it all day long. We're like, well, what if I do this? Or, man, my governor's bad here, and all these things. And it's like, hold up, pause. It's not that you have to submit to the point where you abandon who you are. You submit to the point knowing there's consequences for the things that might happen to you. Okay? This is the reason Peter, when they said, stop preaching the name of Jesus, who did? The governing authorities. Don't preach in that name. Peter, pause, hold up. Jesus, whom you crucified, I will not stop preaching about. I will not do that because that's not who I am. So I will do it. That's cool, Peter. Just know you're going to get thrown into prison. You're going to get flogged. All these things. Listen, I don't care. You can throw me in inner prison all you want. I will not abandon who I am to submit to that. I submit to one. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Moses, all of them. Listen, greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. What is that? That is me relying on the conviction and the teaching of what Jesus says. And there comes a point where it comes to a head. Just know there's consequences. When I speed, there's consequences. Right? If I steal something, there's consequences. What is that? Right? This is what Paul is getting to. Paul's going like, you're getting hung up on the wrong things. You're making it about what it isn't and you're missing the eternal value of what we're talking about. And this is when we come to Romans 14. And all of it is to disrupt the unity that Jesus prayed for in the church. Because Romans 14, he's talking to the Roman church and he's talking to believers. And he categorizes believers in two ways, weak and strong. And the weak ones are so offended that he's called them weak. They can't even hear what he's saying. They miss the point that he still called them a believer. You know why? Because there's going to be believers in heaven that you wouldn't have put there, but God does. You're like, how did she make it? He's like, because you're not in charge. That's how she made it. Because if you were in charge, you wouldn't make it. Oh, but it's so weird that I'm judging people that sin differently than I do. And Jesus says, this is what is disrupting. We're disrupting the unity that should be in the body of Christ, and this is what he's addressing. He's addressing his prayer that Jesus prayed in John 17 for us. Today, April the 25th, 2021, Jesus prayed for you, and he said, my prayer is not for them who's with me alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. He says, listen, the message of the disciples, the apostles, they're saved. And because of the message, there's going to be thousands, millions, billions of people that will come to know me because of them. That's us. Do you believe? If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, he's talking to us. He says, I pray for them. And then he says this, that all of them may be, there's the word, one. Father, just as you are in me and I in you. He's like, listen, as we're one, I pray we are one. This is his prayer. And he's saying, listen, Church at Rome, Life Community Church, every church in America, the enemy wants to divide and make you not one. That's his goal. Here's his game plan. How do I divide them? How do I make them selfish? How do I make it about them? How do I take a bunch of individuals, which is always the most difficult part? How do I take individuals and bring them into this community? And he says things, Paul says things in 1 Corinthians about this. He says, listen, if the whole body were an eye, where would your hearing be? Like these are these kindergarten questions. Like, listen, if all of us were an eye, who's listening? Right? We get it. He's putting it on our level. If the whole were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? I didn't know that was a day yesterday, but thank you, you know. If you want to freak people out, just walk in and be like, I can't taste or smell. Is that good? I mean, things you couldn't say a year ago, right? But now, God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body, just as he desired. Verse 18 says it a different way in another translation. If each part of the body were the same part, there would be no body. But truly God put all the parts, each one of them, in the body as he wanted. This is what he's addressing. Paul is talking to the Roman church who are Jews and Gentiles, and they're coming together. And he's like, how do we work this thing together? How do we get you to come together? And he's addressing some crazy issues, right? He's addressing like food stuff. Let's look, first three verses. Now accept the one who is weak in faith, but not for the purpose of passing judgment on his opinions. One person has faith that he may eat all things. But he who is weak eats vegetables only. Come on, vegetarians. This is Paul, you guys. So if you're a vegetarian in this room, Paul said it, all right? Paul said it. In fact, hold on. I'm going to read, hold on. I don't think I have it up there. I got to read the NLT version. If you got the NLT, read it right now. It's awesome. It is awesome. Oh, come on. But another believer with a sensitive conscience will only eat vegetables. Oh, you can eat vegetables. You're just so sensitive. You know why you're sensitive? Eat some meat. This is the Bible, you guys. Like, don't get mad at me. All right? The one who eats is not to regard with contempt the one who does not eat. And the one who does not eat is not to judge the one who eats, for God has accepted him. He's like, listen, Jews and Gentiles, you're coming together. And because you're coming together, you have disagreements on what should be eaten and what shouldn't be. And I'm telling you right now, this needs to stop. I've accepted you all. Stop it. Just stop the fighting. He's like, listen, you're fighting over, if you look at the NLT, it starts off with the first verse and it says, accept other believers who are weak in faith, but don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. He's like, listen, you're having arguments over things that don't really matter. At the end of the day, they don't matter. What color the carpet is, what color the paint is, isn't going to be one of the questions when you pass over into eternity. He's like, you're making non-essentials the subject, and you're missing the point of what should be bringing us together. This, in essence, is Romans 14. He's saying, he breaks it down. These 23 verses, he breaks down in what we need to know and now what we need to do. What do we do with what we know now? And he says, listen, here's the essentials. Jesus came. He died. He rose again. And the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives inside of us. Agree on that. Agree on that. And then here's what you do with everybody else. Accept them. Oh, you're like, no, I want to make them look like me. I want them to believe what I believe. I want them to wear what I wear and to eat what I eat and drink what I drink. I'm going to make them a clone of me. And he goes, stop it. You're an ear trying to make the ear an eye, and they're an eye, and they're trying to listen. It makes no sense. He's like, stop it. Stop it. It makes no sense. Agree on the essentials. Stop fighting over the right and wrong. What's some non-essentials? Well, that guy, he's got tattoos. I don't know if I can listen to him. I don't really like his glasses. We can argue all day long about it. I don't like that he wears Nikes. Nike's the devil, you know. I don't really like the music. We can argue over opinions all day long. I don't really like the coffee. I don't really like all these non-essentials. He's like, stop it. Church at Rome, stop fighting over the non-essentials and get on the same page, because when you're focused on the temporary, you miss the eternal. And this is his point. His point is, here's the solutions. Acceptance is the right response to disputable and non-essential matters. You know what you and I don't do? We don't accept people. We don't accept people for who they are. We try to make them something that we are. You know, the hardest things to do as a parent is to not make them your little clones, not live your high school dreams through them, not take the disadvantages that you had and place them on them. What happens when they come back and like, I don't want what you want? You accept them. You don't push them down a path to where now they're playing a sport or in something because you want them to, and now at 18, they're no longer under your roof. They no longer care about your opinion. They're doing their own thing. Maybe that should have started earlier. That's hard. As a parent, you want to control it. What do I do when they don't want to do they don't do what I want them to do? You accept them. Is what he says. Accept one another. Oh, I don't know that I like this. I don't think Paul asked. I don't think there's... This is what the Life Application Study Bible says about these two groups of people, strong and weak. I love this. I'll put it on the screen. A person's faith is strong in an area if he or she can survive contact with sinners without falling into their patterns. The person's faith is weak in an area if that individual must avoid certain activities, people, or places in order to protect his or her spiritual life. Whew. When I hang out with this people, I become this people. When I hang out with this people, I become this people. They're like, stop. It's fine. You're still a believer. You're just weak. Well, I don't know how I feel about being called weak. The cool part is, he still calls you a believer. Hear me. He's saying to us, you're my son, you're my daughter, but you're weak in some areas. Everybody knows it. You're just the last one to figure it out. So here's how you evaluate. Am I getting caught up in non-essential things, or am I fighting about heaven and hell, right or wrong? Or am I fighting about things that are just temporary and really at the end of the day don't matter? Like, these are the things that we have to understand. He says, don't let the stronger brother despise the one who does not eat, and don't let the weaker one judge the one who does. He says, listen, there's this tendency that we have, and both of us need to be aware that we have to guard our hearts. Listen to this. They who are aware of their own sins have no eyes for the sins of their neighbors. See, when I'm aware of where I am, I grow in a place that I never thought I would grow because I'm aware only. Just by being aware, just by being in the know, I know how to move forward. If I don't believe it and I'm not aware, then I'm the last one that knows. This is what he's saying. He's saying, listen, when I'm aware that everybody else isn't sinners, that I'm actually one, I view people differently. When I'm aware of what is going on. Second thing is, people with opposing viewpoints on non-essentials can be perfectly right with God. Do I believe that? Do I believe that if someone thinks differently than me, that could still be right with God, even though they differ than what I'm talking about. And this is what he said. This is what he said. Verse 4. Who are you to judge the servant of another? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand. One person regards one day above another. Another regards every day alike. Each person must be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it for the Lord, and he who eats does so for the Lord, for he gives thanks to God. And he who eats not for the Lord, he does not eat and gives thanks to God. He's saying, listen, if this person wants to observe Saturday as a holy day, let them. If they want to take Sunday and as a business, don't open on Sunday like Chick-fil-A or other businesses that don't do it, let them. What is that to you? Except when you have the craving on Sunday afternoon and you're mad at Chick-fil-A, right? You're like, should have went last night. It's not the same microwave, but I should have went, you know? He's saying, why are you consuming your life with things that don't matter? They don't matter. At the end of the day, they don't matter. And he says, listen, verse 10, we should not judge because we're going to be judged. This is what he's saying. He's saying, but you, why do you judge your brother? Or you again, why do you regard your brother with contempt? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall give praise to God. So then each one of us will give an account himself to God. This is backing up what Jesus already said in Matthew 7, which is not on the screens. He already said this. But listen what he says. He says, do not judge others, comma, and you will not be judged. Then he throws this in it. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. He's saying, listen, in your judgment and how you treat people, just know the standard you use will be turned around and used against you. So if you want to be judgy, if you want to be critical, if you want to point the finger at everybody, just know that that's the standard that's going to be used against you. It's cool. Do it. But just know, when it's done to you, don't be like, why is this happening? It's happening because the Bible talks about sowing and reaping. And you reap what you sow. And it gives us this beautiful picture. If you plant apple seeds and it's watered, an apple tree comes from it. Right? If I'm looking at the apple tree, I'm going, become an orange. And I pray, be an orange. Now. And I get like Pentecostal, Benny Hinnish, you know, like start blowing on it or whatever. He's like, nothing's changing that. Why? Because you're reaping what you sowed. In judgment and how you treat others, you're reaping what you sow. I don't know how else to explain that. That's it. That's it. So what do we need to do in order to experience unity? Verse 13 says this. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore. Someone's like, didn't he already say that? He did, but it was for the people in the back. But rather, determine this, not to put an obstacle or stumbling block in a brother's way. I know and I'm convinced in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in itself, but to him who thinks anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. For if because of food your brother is hurt, you are no longer walking according to love, do not destroy with your food him whom Christ has died. He's saying, listen, you have an opportunity to make life easier for people and to show them Jesus. And if you don't, you're going to be judged differently. He talks about it a little later, and I'm going to read it in a second. He says, listen, every single one of us, we have an opportunity, and it's intentional. I'm doing this on my own accord. He's saying, listen, I'm warning you as an individual, if you're around someone and that individual is weaker in the faith and they can't handle whatever it is that you're strong in, it would be wrong of you to go to that person and say, hey, I'm strong, you're weak, but let me tempt you with this. He said, in essence, what you're doing is you're running a race and you're carrying this and running the race and you throw it in front of them. And now they're stumbling. And he's like, you did that. You're the one that caused them to stumble because you were insensitive to what they struggle with. So he's looking at the strong and he's saying, listen, you better figure this out because as you get stronger, I'm going to bring weaker people to you and you have an opportunity to make them stronger. He says, don't trip them up. Amen. Stop tripping is what he said. Amen. No tripping. No tripping up in here. You better recognize. That's right. Luke 17 says, one day Jesus said to his disciples, there will always be temptations to sin, but what sorrow awaits the person who does the tempting. Not the weaker one, the stronger one. He's saying, there's sorrow that waits the one who's tempting. And then he gives us this incredible picture. It would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to fall into sin. Whew, what a picture. He says, go fishing, get out in the middle of the lake, put concrete around your neck and jump in. He's like, it'll be better for you to do that than to cause that weak person to sin. Obviously, he's not telling us physically to do that. He's giving us a picture of how serious he takes you and I becoming a temptation to people around us. Listen to what I'm about to say to you, okay? I get in this room, there's liberties that you are strong at. There's things that you can do because you're strong in those areas. But just know this, there are little eyes that are watching you that are not strong. They can't handle what you're doing. To which I would take it a step further and say, if it has to be done in private when nobody's watching, is it really beneficial for you? So is this a liberty or is this being stubborn? It's a question. Is this I'm free in this liberty, or is this you being stubborn with, God, I'll give you everything, but don't make me give up that? And God goes, it's cool, you're still a believer, you're still walking, just know you're weak in this area. Be careful. Be careful, strong ones, when you've mastered something, that when you're around others, you don't throw a block in their way. Because I want you to see how serious I take it. I want you to see how serious it is. Whether we are strong or weak, he's saying we are not to focus on the externals, we are to focus on the eternals. And this is what I want us to see. Listen to this quote. I'll tell you afterwards who it's from. It might surprise you. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Steve Jobs said that. Listen, remembering that I'll be dead soon. We saw it on the rope from Pastor Sean last week, right? Remembering that our life is but a blip. Our life is but a short vapor, the Bible says. It's just a here today, gone tomorrow. Remembering that. He's saying all the fear, all the embarrassment, all the it matters not when I'm faced with death. What is he saying? He's saying I'm putting too much in the temporary and the externals and not enough in the eternal. This is his point. In the exercise of our Christian freedom, pursue that which brings mutual benefit. That's what he says in verse 19. So when we pursue the things which make for peace and the building up of one another, do not tear down the work of God for the sake of food, for the sake of the temporary. Don't tear down. All things indeed are clean, but they are evil for the man who eats and gives offense. He's saying whether we are weak or strong, make sure all of our actions are done with a clear conscience. Make sure what you're doing and who you are, that you believe what it is that you are. And this is why he says to the strong in verse 22, the faith which you have as your own conviction before God. Happy is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. And to the weak he says, but he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because his eating is not from faith, and whatever is not from faith is sin. He's saying to us all, don't allow the temporary, the non-essential, the opinions of right and wrong get in the way of eternity. Get in the way of fighting about the temporary things that we miss the eternal things. This is why the most important message that Jesus had was this in John 15. And this is my command. What's the command? Love one another the way I loved you. This is the very best way to love. Put your life on the line for your friends. He's saying, listen, this is the best way that you can love, that you're willing to put your life on your line so that people grow, that people get better, that people mature, that people come to know Jesus, and not that they come to know Jesus like you did, or they're not acting like you. He says, no, I'm asking you to love them the way I loved you, and I forgave you. I never turned my back on you. Nothing could ever separate us from this love. And he's like, I'm asking you to do the exact same thing. It changes the way we see people, you guys. When I understand as a believer that I don't have it all figured out and that people need me to love them where they are. That's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing. Because again, it's not about eternal things that get us hung up. It's about opinions. And the enemy is laughing at the church, the messy, redeemed church. The enemy is laughing at us going, they're fighting. Look what they're fighting over. My God, they're fighting over a song. Listen, when I was in probably, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I lived in a street that had a church in the street. And we didn't go to that church. We went to one downtown Granite City. And I remember because I had friends that did go there, and I may or may not have dated the pastor's daughter that lived next door, but side note, we don't need to talk about that. But I remember it made Channel 5 News that the church was having a vote on how to move forward because the pastor had fired the secretary, and the secretary's family was mad about it. And they were holding a vote whether they should stay in that denomination based on what the pastor did. And St. Louis News covered it. And what they saw was a church that couldn't get along because the pastor fired the secretary. And her family was upset, and because her family was upset, they were going to vote. And you know what they were going to do in that vote? Whether we should stay in this denomination, because this denomination was okay with him firing the secretary. So we're going to show them. And the vote, I kid you not, was 251 to 249. So now, let's just pick up and start a new one across town, because now we're a church divided. And the church divided now is across town from each other. Because the easy solution is, hey, Rome, hey, Greeks and Jews, I'm asking you to get along. But the easy solution is just go start a Jewish church and go start a Gentile church. Now, I will tell you the good news is they reconciled some 15, 20 years later. There was restoration that happened. But what an embarrassment that if I'm a non-believer turning on the news and I hear church group scuffles, right? That's another headline, but another day that I may or may not have been in, but whatever. Anyway, what as a non-believer did you just see? You just saw, why would I go there? Why would I want to be a part of that? Why would I want to experience that? This is why the only unanswered prayer of Jesus is, God, may they be one, as you and I are one. And still today, that's the contention that the enemy has for you and I. How do we move forward as one? How do we move forward? This is what John said. John said in John 3:30, and we must live this out. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less. He says, listen, he's got to become greater, and I got to become less. You know the only way sometimes to unity is for me to say, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Listen, you may have been right. It's not about right and wrong right now. It's about unity. Well, I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. And that's where we land. To which I would ask, for the sake of what? Someone's eternity be lost? You won't humble yourself enough and reconcile a situation because you won't say sorry? Because you won't say I was wrong? Because you won't admit that you made a mistake for the sake of eternity? You're throwing stones in the way of people and they're stumbling. And your kids are watching. Don't talk to me about you being strong in an area when that's what we're doing. He's saying, John is praying, God, you got to become greater. Because when you become greater, it's less about me and it's more about you. And when it's more about you, people are saved. Eternity is gained. The kingdom of heaven is advancing. Eternity wins. Angels in heaven rejoice when we live that way. And it's got to be a daily prayer. This isn't something that I tattoo on my arm and I just every once in a while live. This is me every single day. God, that you would be greater today. Because there's going to be a moment that I get to have an attitude. And God, I'm praying that your attitude comes out of me. And there's going to be something wrong that's said to you. God, I want less of me because how I'm going to respond. This is the reason Romans 13 says, clothe yourself with Jesus. Put on Jesus' clothes. Make Jesus the one you're wearing. Why? Because when I wear me, man, you get a horrible response. Oh, man. And it's like tensious and awkward. And I mean, I'm okay with awkward, but tensious is weird. Do you know what changes it? You know what changes the tension that's happening? Humility. Humility. Humility wins every time. Humility doesn't wait for their turn to talk. Humility is quiet. Humility says, I'm sorry. Humility says, I take the blame. Humility wants reconciliation. So when John is praying, God, it's got to be about you. It's got to be about you. He's saying, I want us to be so one that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be reconciled to you. This is the point. This is the point. Would you stand with me right now? We're going to sing a song that, normally, I don't know that we would sing this song. You might have heard it on the radio. You might have downloaded it at some point or heard it in passing. I wouldn't say we would normally end with this type of song. It's wordy, but there's a line in there that just says a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. And this to me is the prayer. This is what we're spending our summer in. Like, Jesus, what is it that you said? Because there's an expectation on your life, and you came and you did the opposite. And you taught us something. You showed humility. You touched the leper. You healed. And so, God, I need to know what it is that you're saying to me in 2021 on how to be. Because ultimately what he's saying, whether you're a weak believer or a strong believer, what you believe turns into how you behave. And how you behave matters. How you treat people matters. The words you say matter, and the tone you say them in matters. Sometimes it's not what you say. It's how you said it. And how I say it sometimes is a little more me and a little less Jesus. Come on, somebody. Anybody else in this room? This isn't a hit your neighbor type of moment. This is... So Jesus, we come to you today. God, we need you. And we make this our prayer, God, that we might decrease, that you might increase in our life today. God, we need you. We acknowledge that. We can't do this on our own. And we're full of pride and guilt and shame and regret, but you've come. You've changed it all. You've set a standard, and the standard is that you love us despite us. So God, our prayer today is, would you help us to be the men and women that you've called us to be? As fathers, as mothers in this room, as husbands, as fathers, as young adults, as teenagers, God, we need you, and we acknowledge it. So God, I pray today, I pray for the unity of the church in this hour. God, that we are not know-it-alls. We are sons and daughters who are listening.